Laniata is a subspecies of Monstera Adansonii that is renowned for its gargantuan leaves. While it is growing in nature, it will clamber up trees with ease and produce impressively large foliage. However, you don't have a tree in your home. So the way you would attain those gorgeous, huge leaves is by growing your plants out and then taking top cuttings of your large plants. You would then root those cuttings and start them over from the bottom. The problem is, the thicker a plant's vine is, the more difficult it is to root the cuttings successfully. It doesn't matter what plant you're trying to root. Those aerial roots may work well for you when you're rooting a small plant cutting, but when you're rooting plants with leaves of this size and a vine this thick, that is a lot of plant for those little aerial roots to support. And if you've ever tried, you know many of those cuttings don't survive. But what if there were a 100% surefire way to root any plant, regardless of how thick the vine is? Well, there is. You need to root it while it's still on the vine, before you take your cutting. While the vine you're planning to cut is still part of the plant, it obviously has the full support of the plant's root system. So just root those nodes while the plant is still intact. And after it is rooted, you can then take your cutting. It's a super easy method, and I'll show you how to do it. Here's what you're going to need. A cheap, flimsy nursery pot. Don't get a stiff one. It needs to be flexible and easy to cut. And obviously, that's why you need the scissors. Rooting hormone. To be honest, we really don't notice a difference between the cheap stuff you get from Walmart for $5 or the expensive gels on Amazon. But I'm going to use the Clonex gel just because this is a vertical application and it will be easier to brush on while I'm filming. Next, we use the $5 sphagnum moss that you get from Lowe's. It works well for us. You're also going to need some water, obviously, to moisten the sphagnum moss. And this is optional, but because you can't use fertilizer with emerging new roots, I add a little liquid dirt in the water when I moisten the sphagnum moss. This won't burn the new developing roots and will actually provide nutrients to the plant through the aerial roots. The next thing you're going to need is some plastic wrap to secure the pot and some aluminum foil to cover it up. And finally, some hose to tie it all together and possibly a command hook to hold the totem up, as this whole thing can be heavy. First, you're going to take your pot and cut it up the side and cut a small hole in the bottom to fit the pot around the vine. Next, again, this is optional, but you're going to add a little liquid dirt to your water. I don't really measure it, I just pour about yay much in there. Next, moisten about 2 handfuls of sphagnum moss. Now, let's just take a look at this plant. What you're basically wanting to do is have those top nodes start producing additional roots that will grow nicely in various media, be it more sphagnum, soil, leca, whatever you choose. So we're going to place the pot around the top nodes so that those top 2 aerial roots are inside of the pot. Depending on the thickness of your vine, you may need to make the hole in the bottom of the pot larger to fit around it. Here's the view from the bottom. This is the view from the top. And you can see the aerial roots in there. Next, since you cut the pot up the side, you're going to need to make it somewhat intact again. So we use these $5 Walmart knee-highs to tie it together. Use one to tie the leaves up to get them out of the way. Next, you're going to tie the pot together. And using the remainder of the hose, you're going to tie the pot to your totem. Now, most of you won't have a trellis, you'll most likely have a moss pole, but you're going to tie it exactly the same. Just tie the hose snugly around the pot and then tie it to the moss pole. Next, you're going to want to seal up the bottom of the pot, and you can use saran wrap for that. You're going to wrap and tuck the ends under the pantyhose. Next, you're going to take your sphagnum moss and line the bottom of the pot. Then you're going to either sprinkle on your rooting powder or paint on your rooting gel. After everything is coated, you're going to go ahead and fill up the pot with sphagnum moss. Okay, this is the final product. The pot is full of sphagnum, the aerial roots are coated with rooting hormone, the pot is secure to the totem, and the plant is still intact, so while these nodes are rooting, they are still supported by the full root system of the plant. Now the final thing you want to do is trick it into thinking it is in the ground. That will accelerate it creating soil roots. So we're going to put foil all around the pot to simulate total darkness for those roots. This will also help keep the sphagnum moss moist. And finally, you can either take a photo to mark the date or actually write the date on the side of the pot. I like to wait about 2 months before taking the cutting, just to make sure the roots are very well established. And in a couple of months, this huge top cutting is going to be gorgeous, pre-rooted, and ready to go into whatever media you want to grow it in. Now, sometimes this can be heavy, especially if you plan on using other media like soil instead of sphagnum. You can use some hose and a command hook to hold either your trellis or your moss pole against the wall. Now I did this rooting method on a Laniata, and I planned to take the cutting on camera to show you all how well it works. I'll show you why I can't take the cutting just yet, but as you can see, there are extensive roots. In fact, this method works so well, the roots are coming out of the top of the pot. Sorry about the sun glare. This portion of the vine is obviously up very high. So at this point, you would take your cutting and either leave it in sphagnum or transplant it to soil. However, right before I was about to take this cutting, I noticed this plant is getting ready to fruit. I put a poster board behind it so you can see it more clearly without the sun glare, but that is the start of fruiting. Although Monstera deliciosa is well known for its delicious fruit, most people are unaware that all Monsteras fruit. Even that small Adansonii you have in your home right now will fruit after many years. If you orient it to climb, allow it to mature, and give it the right conditions, it will fruit. But anyway, back to this cutting. Though it is well rooted, it is still not fully rooted. It is still using the energy provided by the plant's root system to sustain itself. If I were to take this cutting now, the plant would prioritize making roots for survival over maturing that fruit. That fruit would likely just die. And I want to show you guys the fruiting process because it's really cool. Laniata makes a tiny, adorable fruit, and I want to chronicle that process for you. So I'm not going to take this cutting just yet. So I filmed all of that about a week ago, but when I started editing this video, I noticed a suspicious bump on the very plant that I used to demonstrate the rooting method. I went out to take a look, and sure enough, it has started fruiting, you guys. So I was planning on listing this one, but I'm going to hold on to it so it can flower, get pollinated, go through the whole fruiting process, and I want to chronicle all of that for you guys because it's so freaking cool with its cute little miniature fruit. And I don't think anyone has done that on YouTube. So I want to chronicle all that, and after it goes through the whole fruiting process, I'll put it up for sale. So anyway, stay tuned for its progress. And if you want your own large mature Laniata so you can grow your own fruit, we have plenty for sale. Come over and see us on our Etsy shop.